Personal brand, how important is it for top executives and board members?
If we don't articulate who we are and what we do, how will others know who we are and what we stand for?
You don't build your LinkedIn profile for yourself, you build it for your target audience, more specifically for your ICP, ideal customer profile.
Without communication, no brand exists. Let's clearly acknowledge this point for ourselves. Building a personal brand is a marathon, and trying to run it at sprint speed can end up being literally traumatic for the runner.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Boards of Directors with Sergiy Bulavin channel. Before we begin today's episode, I would like to share some statistics and reference a few sources. 58% of top managers consider CEO reputation a key factor in deciding whether to stay with a company. 44% of a company's market value directly depends on the reputation of its leader. LinkedIn remains the key platform for professional branding, especially for board members. The platform reaches over 1 billion users. This audience is critically important for building and maintaining professional connections. Personal branding for board members has distinct characteristics compared to executive branding. For board members, a personal brand builds trust and opens access to new opportunities. Today, we will focus precisely on these topics: brand and personal brand in the context of members of the boards of directors and supervisory boards. And today, our guests are Dmytro Melnykovych and Ihor Nikolenko. Dmytro has been a personal brand mentor since 2021. He is also a mentor within the International Business Community Board. Dmytro has hosted over 100 live sessions on personal branding and is the author of publications in Forbes Ukraine and NV on the topic of personal branding. In addition, Dmytro is the author of the Personal Branding Workbook. Ihor is a recognized LinkedIn mentor with more than 13 years of experience in international companies. Ihor currently has around 34,000 direct connections on LinkedIn. He was also the first in Ukraine to host a live broadcast directly on LinkedIn. Ihor's expertise includes delivering B2B projects worth USD 5.4 million through LinkedIn, as well as creating the first Ukrainian language course, LinkedIn Boost Camp. Ihor has also worked with companies such as KPMG, Kyivstar, Novapost, and others. Ihor, Dmytro, it is widely believed that for board members, in order to build a career in this direction, it is essential to have strong networking, a personal brand, visibility, trust, and so on. However, there are cases where a strong brand is actually backed by very weak experience and limited expertise. How can this be identified, and what should be done in such situations?
Can a strong personal brand compensate for a lack of expertise? I will answer briefly, no. You can buy attractive packaging, but when you open it and find that the content is not what you expected, the result is disappointment at best and negative outcomes at worst. And we are talking about business. We are talking about money. About negative outcomes for the business and for the results the business is expected to achieve. By debunking this, rather popular assumption, fake it till you make it. I think this idea may make sense in some contexts and is worth discussing, but it does not work here. In this space, you cannot afford to make mistakes until things eventually work out. Because once again, we are coming back to the issue of money. So my answer is no. However, building a personal brand based on the actual expertise of a potential board member, that is the core topic of today's conversation.
Ihor, what is your perspective?
My answer is that it can work, but only once. To elaborate, I would refer to a metaphor by Vladimir Tarasov, who said that everything can be divided into what is hollow and what is solid, and any combination of the hollow and the solid ultimately remains hollow. Therefore, a personal brand without substance will eventually be exposed, and people will realize that the emperor has no clothes.
I'll add to your point about only once. It's like mushrooms. You can eat all mushrooms, but some of them only once, some of them only once.
On the other hand, there are many highly qualified professionals who pay little or no attention to personal branding at all. They are excellent experts, and perhaps someone knows them within a narrow circle. But from the perspective of board members or from the standpoint of building a career as an independent director, such people are often effectively invisible because they are difficult to find and there is very little publicly available information about them. On the other hand, there are cases where there is an overwhelming amount of information, and it becomes clear that behind the person there is almost nothing except the ability to build a personal brand. In your opinion, how important is personal branding in general for top executives and for board members?
I was once struck by a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger's book Total Recall, where he talks about a violinist playing in his basement. He says, you may be an outstanding violinist, playing a world-class instrument, but if you are playing in a basement and no one hears you, no one will ever know about you. So, using this metaphor, my answer is that for any professional who develops and sells their competencies, and when we talk about board members, we are talking about people who sell their competencies, their time, and their expertise, it is essential to come out of that metaphorical basement and to play to an audience so that people can hear the music you play and form an informed impression of you, both as a person and as a professional. That is why, for me, it is critically important that a professional deliberately builds their personal professional brand and does so in a structured, consistent, and conscious way.
I fully agree. I would like to raise a question. What is a personal brand actually? Over the course of my work in this field, I have arrived at a simple formula. A personal brand is what others know about us. And what they know comes from what is said about us and what we say about ourselves through direct communication, social media, public speaking, books that some may write, participation in various initiatives, reputation, word of mouth, and so on. In other words, every manifestation of ourselves adds another point to our personal brand, to its visibility and to how it is understood. And since we build a personal brand so that people understand who we are, what our expertise is, and what we do, if our goal is to become a board member, we demonstrate that expertise through content and through different channels. As I mentioned earlier, there are many of them, and it would be a mistake to say that social media alone equals personal branding. The scope of interaction is much broader. In fact, our entire life becomes a communication channel. And to answer the question of whether it is important, yes, it is. Why? Certainly not for self-promotion or boasting. It is so that others can know, because if we do not articulate who we are and what we do, how will others ever find out? It is not about boasting, it is about speaking. This is a very important distinction. We are not talking about blogging in the classic sense today. We are talking about expertise and about showing both what has worked and what has not. This is critically important because when a business owner selects a board member, they want to understand how you dealt with mistakes, challenges, and problems. And if you speak about this honestly, showing how you handled those situations and what your personal role was, the chances of joining a board increase significantly.
Absolutely. And most likely, there are common mistakes people make when building a personal brand. For example, inconsistency, when a brand is built in a chaotic, unstructured way, or when the brand owner is afraid of feedback, and so on. From your experience, what are the most common mistakes you see among the clients you work with?
Mistakes are probably my favorite part of this conversation. The key mistake is that people try to measure the success of their personal brand by the number of Instagram followers. This is the most classic and widespread misconception. How can I gain 500,000 followers in 6 months? Fine, run a giveaway, raffle off a car, or start handing out lemons. You will get 500,000 followers. But who will they be? People who came for freebies, and once the campaign is over, they will disappear. So focusing on quantity while neglecting quality is, in my view, a fundamental mistake. The first priority should be quality. Quantity will grow as a result of becoming genuinely interesting and valuable to your audience. The second mistake, closely related to the first, is believing that your target audience is everyone. In our case, for example, everyone in business. We don't need everyone. We need a very specific group of people, a defined group of companies who are ready for and understand what a board of directors actually is. As we discussed earlier, this requires a shift in the mindset of the business owner. If an owner does not understand why they need a board, they will simply appoint a friend, a relative, or a close associate, no offense intended, without a real understanding of the expertise required. In that case, they won't go to the market to look for a specialist. For example, if they need to take a company public, they need someone on the board who has already gone through an IPO. And then they start looking, perhaps in Forbes or another publication, for someone who has helped other companies go public or has taken their own company through an IPO. And if I want that result, I will bring that person onto the board. Therefore, to avoid the mistake of chasing follower counts just for the sake of numbers, it makes much more sense to focus on communicating your expertise through targeted channels to a clearly defined target audience. Another common mistake is believing that it delivers fast results. Building a personal brand is a marathon, and trying to run it at sprint speed can easily end in injury for the runner. That is why you need to choose the distance consciously. You understand that it is long, you understand that you need a team to support you, to help you prepare at the start, hand you water along the way, give you energy gels so that you don't collapse halfway through the race, and accordingly, you run with a clear goal and complete this marathon step by step. It will not be fast, that is certain. And it will not be cheap. This is also important to understand because high-quality channels are not inexpensive. Another common mistake is playing someone else's game. Why do you want to become a board member? Is it because you genuinely feel this is your path, or because your friends and partners are already there and it looks attractive? I'd like to sit there too, do nothing and get paid. There is probably such a stereotype. If we draw a parallel with Instagram, everyone wants to be a blogger. Almost everyone. Why? Followers, attention, monetization, and so on. But once you step inside, you realize that it is work. And you actually have to work, you face hate, pressure, and your mental resilience is constantly tested. There are many cases where bloggers burn out, lose control, or end up crying on camera. Those who have gone through it may now be driving a Rolls-Royce, as in a recent case.
It is widely believed that there is a significant difference between the personal brand of a board member and the personal brand of a top executive or CEO. There is even a metaphor. The difference between a CEO's brand and a board member's brand is like a sword versus a scalpel. A CEO's brand is a sword, broad, public, and inspiring statements aimed at the market and the team. And a board member's brand is a scalpel. Precisely, it is about precision, balance, and depth. For me personally, when I transitioned from an executive career to a non-executive career and board membership, it was a major challenge. I had to fundamentally shift the perception of those who knew me to move them away from seeing me as an executive. I deliberately chose a non-executive path, yet people continued to assess me through an executive lens in terms of executive-level expertise. For me, this was a significant challenge to address and recalibrate that perception, and I cannot say that I have fully completed this transition. I still have a lot of work ahead of me. In your view, what is the difference between the personal brand of an executive and that of a board member?
With your permission, I would like to introduce another metaphor. To me, comparing a CEO and a board member feels somewhat similar with the following. A CEO is like a powerful spotlight on a ship, illuminating the route and showing where the vessel is heading. And a board member, or the board brand more broadly, is a lighthouse. It precisely defines coordinates, guides people, and helps them navigate an environment that is changing rapidly. That is why, for me, the difference is very clear. A CEO is about what needs to be done here and now, which actions to take, which operational tasks to solve, and which resources are required. It is more about execution and immediate results. A board member, by contrast, is about strategy, resilience, and building a robust framework that helps a company not only survive, but scale and grow. It is about creating a shared system of coordinates, clear for all participants within the corporate ecosystem, that helps everyone stay oriented and avoid drifting off course. That is why the lighthouse metaphor resonates with me when it comes to board members. It helps companies and business owners navigate and stay on course. So there is clearly a difference in communication because the target audiences of CEOs and board members are fundamentally different. I always repeat this. If we return to LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile is not built for you. It is built for your target audience, essentially for your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Therefore, if a CEO has one target audience, a board member may have a completely different one. And accordingly, the profile itself and the emphasis within that profile must be structured in a very different way. In short,
this applies to management roles in general, but it has an even greater impact when it comes to board members, including advisory boards and supervisory boards.
You used a strong metaphor, and Ihor added his own. If we have already covered the differences, I would now like to approach this from the perspective of perception by the audiences of these two roles, CEO and board member. Without communication, no brand exists. Let's lock this in. When we communicated while holding a CEO position, people knew us as CEOs. As I said earlier, a personal brand is what people know about us. They formed a certain understanding of us as CEOs. At the stage of changing this positioning, we need to start communicating who we are today in the role of a board member. At this point, I may not have an answer, but rather a question for you because you mentioned that you have already gone through this transition. What did you do after your status changed from CEO to board member to shift your target audience's perception of you away from seeing you as a CEO?
I participated in various events related to corporate governance and board work. From time to time, I had to manage how people introduced me publicly because I was being introduced as Sergiy Bulavin, an expert in private equity and agriculture. I am not primarily a private equity or agri-sector expert, or rather, that was part of my executive career. My current focus is different: corporate governance and a non-executive career.
That is essentially how I began to hear the positioning I wanted to hear. If we do not clearly state this shift, even something as simple as in the headline of our LinkedIn profile, people will continue to refer to us as CEOs even when we no longer are. That's why we sometimes overlook these things or fail to give them enough attention. For example, I had a client who stepped away from the business for a period of time for various reasons, then returned. After we had been working together for a while, I simply told him, write a post. His primary channel is Facebook, stating that you are back in business and clearly outlining your current core expertise, exactly within the framework we discussed. No more, no less. At the point when he accepted that this is who he is today rather than everything he has been in the past, with countless roles. Lawyer, something else as we often say. When you publish that simple post, friends, I'm back and this is what I can help with today. 4 or 5 people immediately reached out to him via direct messages. Simple, but instantly effective. Of course, this alone does not immediately resolve the broader understanding of who you are, because that then needs to be reinforced in different ways and through different types of content. Posts, articles, public speaking, and so on. And what you are doing now, for example. Thank you. This is already your 42nd or 43rd episode. From the perspective of someone who has also hosted many live sessions, this is truly impressive. It is a significant amount of work, but it strongly embeds itself in the audience's perception. Your expertise becomes clear, concrete, and consistently associated with the topics you communicate through these sessions. The only thing to remember is that if another major shift occurs, you will once again need to actively reshape the audience's understanding of who you are.
I would also like to add something that resonated with me from Dmytro's point about headlines and seemingly simple details. Simply stating that you are already a board member or a member of several advisory or supervisory boards, and then using the About section of your profile to tell the story of how you arrived at this point and what is relevant to you for the next 2 to 3 years. And in your keyword cloud, intentionally selecting tags, phrases, and words that reflect your new development vector. This helps search algorithms find you precisely for this specific competence when someone is searching. Because we live in a digital world, and if we do not leave the right digital footprints, how will people who are looking for specific expertise ever find us? That is why it is very important for me to build a coherent structure on LinkedIn, what I call a 3D professional avatar, one that reflects all facets of who you are, while clearly emphasizing the most relevant aspects of your current professional identity. It is therefore essential to do the work and align your current status with how you appear on social media and in the places where people decide whether they can work with you and whether you are trustworthy, and where they can find you through your digital footprint.
In my view, LinkedIn is an ideal platform when we talk about supervisory and advisory boards. And here, one more important point you mentioned, your digital footprint. I would add that your account is indexed by what on Google. When someone searches for your name, LinkedIn is usually among the first results. And when someone searches for those keyword clusters, now for example, board member or supervisory board, they are likely to find you if those terms are clearly stated in your profile. So this is very much a two-way game.
I would also add that ChatGPT has entered the game. Many people now search for information not only via Google, but also through ChatGPT. The task, therefore, is to ensure that search algorithms can find you through the right keywords, tags, and specializations that are relevant to you today. This makes personal branding a multidimensional, comprehensive task for anyone who works on their professional brand in a structured and conscious way, ensuring it is fully aligned with who you are now and where you want to be in 1, 2, 3, or 5 years.
Yes, and this consistency is critically important. At the same time, I understand that even if you look at my own LinkedIn profile today, there is still a lot there that reflects my CEO past. And I realize that a board member profile may not be as appealing to someone if it is still heavily focused on CEO achievements, because it is a different role.
However, allow me to add my own perspective and slightly disagree with you. People are invited to boards precisely because of their experience and expertise, because of the path they have taken, because they have closed and opened businesses, for example. And if this background isn't clearly described, then simply writing board member on your profile doesn't really mean anything. What you actually have, your experience and achievements, is the proof of your expertise. How you later repackage that information is another matter entirely.
Well, yes. I think it would be strange if someone's LinkedIn profile started with membership on some board.
Like finished school, then joined a supervisory board.
So, how can you measure the quality of your personal brand? How do you know if everything is okay or if something needs to be strengthened? Is your personal brand solid or are there areas to work on?
I'll answer that. First, you need to communicate constantly and listen to what your target audience is telling you. What does communicate mean? Being present at events in environments where your target audience operates, responding to comments under your posts. This is feedback, which gives you an understanding of whether you are moving in the right direction or not. Here, I would like to introduce a term I came across in a very insightful study. The book is called Insight, written by the American psychologist Tasha Eurich. She talks about self-awareness. As a concept, self-awareness is divided into two parts: internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. Internal self-awareness is what I think, know, and imagine about myself, the lens shaped by my experiences, my personal bubble. External self-awareness is how others perceive me. And what does she say in this study? What's important is that these two dimensions align. Let's call it matching on key terms. Clearly, I know a lot about myself, but what others know about me, I can only imagine. When there's a gap, we either live in an illusion, underperform, or fail to develop fully. That's why constant communication with your audience, listening to what they say, testing the assumptions you hold in your mind, whether they actually work, is precisely the way to gauge your personal brand. What you intended, does it actually work? For example, if I attend an event where my contacts are present, or even if most of them aren't, and the first question I get is, how is your personal brand doing? I know that what I aimed for is being achieved. It's working. And when I am introduced to someone, they describe me as a personal branding specialist. I don't even need to speak. The brand speaks for itself. It's already functioning, but it took time to reach this stage. Accumulating a digital footprint, as Ihor mentioned, building overall recognition in the personal branding space, and the fact that I am here today is also a result of this work. Demonstrating to the world that I understand personal branding and that I strive to understand it deeply, through live sessions, research, books, and workbooks. As a result, this also counts as my academic work, which I continually write, though much of it is not yet published. So, if you ask how to measure it, when you dream something for yourself and start receiving it back from people, inquiries, engagement, that means it's working. If your goal is to become a board member and you communicate this, starting with your profile headline, then posts, experience, joint events, participation in relevant conferences, and training at professional institutions, plus networking. Eventually, people will start reaching out. We know about you, or you were recommended to us. Would you like to meet? We have a proposal for you to join a board, and it doesn't have to be immediately commercial. Perhaps it's initially pro bono, but it's experience. If you want it, strive for it and communicate it. You'll gain experience in pro bono work, then present this as a case, and later a commercial opportunity will follow. This is the quality of a personal brand.
There are also agencies you can approach to say, I want to position myself this way, check what exists about me in my profiles, and help me adjust it so I appear on the market as I intend.
Absolutely. My expertise essentially lies in understanding the current state of affairs and, for example, building a framework like the one we discussed. Analytics, analyzing what exists today. Do you even have a personal brand, and how does it look? I believe that we all have a brand from birth, which is simply refined and adjusted with each year of our lives. What is it giving you today? What results are already visible? The current state, like any treatment plan, involves running diagnostics, reviewing the results, and then deciding what needs to be done next. Then why do you want a personal brand? What are the next steps? Who are you in this story? How should you position yourself? Which channels? Which target audience? And so on. There are teams that can do this on your behalf. Clearly, it's extensive and resource-intensive work that you cannot do alone. On the other hand, there's a simple approach. Take screenshots of your social media profiles, upload them to AI, and ask it to provide a critical analysis. How does it see you? Who am I in this whole story? And it might not get it right the first time. You may need to ask a few times, approach it from different angles, and interact with it a little. Once you've integrated this tool into your life, it won't be difficult for you to ask the right questions. Then you can, for example, ask the same questions to your friends. Conduct an anonymous survey. If you have a company with many employees, you can run it there too, again, to understand how you are perceived today. And from that point, you can decide how to act next.
Since I work with business, I always try to link things to concrete metrics that can be quantified. One metric I track digitally is the number of inquiries received per month. From your perspective, based on your core expertise as seen by the outside world, I can say, from people who understand what you do and are willing to engage in a meaningful conversation about integrating your expertise within their company. And I'll share an interesting story. In 2018, or maybe late 2017, I attended a training by Tatiana Lukinyuk, who is now GM at Google. Back then, if I'm not mistaken, she was at Red Bull. She was running a workshop on how to build a personal or professional brand. I don't remember all the details now, but I can trace the start of building my personal and professional brand from that point, from that moment. And there was one simple exercise that I recommend to everyone. Send it to 20, 30 people. Just one question. When you hear my name, what are the first associations that come to mind? If someone asked me about you, Sergiy Bulavin, I would definitely, one of my first associations would be boards of directors, governance. It's something I've embedded into LinkedIn, for example, connected to you as well. So I've been working for about 7 years to be top of mind when a business has a need related to LinkedIn. And experience shows that it works quite well because people associate you with a specific specialization. The key is that when a target contact or potential client has a need, your expertise comes to mind first. That's what a strong personal and professional brand achieves for me. When people find you and remember you, and when they might be interested in your professional experience and current expertise.
Continuing on the topic of associations, I often ask my clients, usually after finishing a project, how was it to work with me, why did you come to me, and so on. It's basically a customer development style survey, something I recommend doing on a regular basis. She described her journey to me. She said, I realized that a personal brand is a powerful tool. I want to develop it, but I don't know where to start. She started by simply Googling personal brand, and she found you right there among the results. She kept searching and saw that personal branding keeps coming up alongside your name. You and personal branding, and she got the impression that you had kind of monopolized this topic. I even came up with a term for it myself, a monopoly thesis. So the question is the association you create, what should your monopoly thesis be so that over time people associate you specifically with this topic? Or with a business direction? It doesn't really matter. For example, Dmytro, Melnykovych and personal branding, that's the association. Ihor, Nikolenko and LinkedIn. I don't have any other association. That's the monopoly thesis. Think about what yours should be.
To support those who post and sometimes feel that no one is reading or noticing their content, I would like to share a figure that personally struck me. 58% of LinkedIn readers belong to the so-called silent community. I refer to them as silent observers. What does this mean? Silent observers may read your content. They may agree or disagree internally, form opinions, and associate you with certain ideas or expertise, but never engage or communicate with you directly. However, when an urgent need arises, they suddenly remember supervisory boards, board members. That's Sergiy Bulavin, and that is when they reach out. As a result, you may have never interacted with this person before, yet they already know you, have seen your content, understand your expertise, and contact you with a very specific request. So, for those who think their content is not being read, 58% are silent observers who may be reading, following, and watching you, without ever engaging with you or your content.
This is a marathon. You are running it, people see you, but they do not interact. And when they need you, they will join you and start running alongside you.
Algorithms on LinkedIn and Facebook may also be changing because previously the same post received more likes on Facebook, more likes than on LinkedIn. And now, for some reason, it performs significantly better on LinkedIn, significantly better.
Algorithms are constantly changing, and it is important to understand that the primary objective of platforms is to generate revenue from users. That is why algorithms are continuously evolving. The most important question is whether your content is relevant to your target audience. Not to everyone, not to a broad audience, but specifically to your target audience. If it is relevant, engagement appears in various forms as LinkedIn defines it, and then your content is shown to a much wider audience that is lookalike, meaning similar to those you already engage with. Therefore, it is crucial to consistently build and expand a network of contacts with people with whom you have a professional future. These are potential clients, potential investors, CEOs and business owners, and the goal is to build relationships with them through consistent, intentional, professional content. There are also operational KPIs in LinkedIn terms. For example, roughly 100 connection requests per week to people from your target audience. This is close to the maximum. And at least one post per week, because by posting once a week, you already enter the top 1% of users across LinkedIn's community of more than 1 billion members. Just one post per week already puts you close to the top 1% of users. That is why it does not seem particularly difficult to do this consistently, to create the right high-quality content and leave a digital footprint through which you can later be found.
It is an interesting scenario to imagine a future member of a supervisory or advisory board or an active board member who wants to receive more opportunities from the market and work more deliberately on their personal brand. Where should they start?
By answering two questions: why do I need this, and what do I want to achieve? This is fundamental. In my experience, most of my clients come to me at a moment of transition. They are no longer where they were, but not yet where they want to be. And they want to make sense of what comes next. I would probably call this an existential shift, and perhaps it sounds ambitious, but it is exactly that. They have stepped out of day-to-day operations, stepped away from a CEO role, and want to move to a more strategic level, a supervisory board, a board role, or something similar. The question then becomes, I was used to living my previous life in a certain way, and it worked for me, but I can no longer continue like that, and I want to change something. This is where the first internal question arises. What is my calling? As I explored the topic of personal branding, I arrived at this concept of calling. What is calling me? The word itself implies being called towards something, somewhere. If it turns out that this calling is, as you say, to change or perhaps narrow one's expertise. For example, having served on boards in various expert roles and then realizing that one specific area resonates most, such as helping companies prepare for and execute an IPO because it is exciting, intellectually engaging, challenging, and aligns with the entirety of one's experience. Then, if this truly resonates, it is essential to listen to yourself, to reflect, to meditate in a very practical sense, to speak with others, and to identify your true superpower and where you create the greatest value. Why do people engage with me at all? What do they value me for? Why do they like me? These are the kinds of questions to ask. The answers usually already exist in our own minds. But when others reflect them back to us, it reinforces our confidence that we are on the right path. And then a very clear focus appears, like a laser directed in one specific direction. You stop dispersing your energy. I recently came across an interesting interpretation of the word freedom. It is not about the ability to do everything you want, but about the ability to choose what you love and consciously give up everything else. And that is where true focus emerges. You become a supervisory board member who helps companies prepare for and execute an IPO. What does this imply? It implies a very narrow target audience. Not every company can or wants to go down that path. It also implies very deep expertise. At the same time, you must be realistic. Is there a market for this? Are there enough companies where you can actually apply this expertise? I am using IPO as an example. It could be something else. A strong HR leader building executive teams, a talent-focused role, a former CFO, and so on. This becomes your niche. In this context, I strongly believe in specialization, in narrow but extremely powerful expertise, in becoming a superstar within a very specific domain. In any field, business or life, there is always someone who is perceived as the superstar and everyone else operates around them. Set yourself the goal of becoming that number one. So my answer to the question, what should I do? Is this. Define your superpower and then invest in it consistently, again and again.
I recommend starting with the Red Bull assessment called Windfinder. At one point, this test fundamentally changed and clarified my professional direction. It sharpened my understanding of my strengths and my career vector. Research shows that real breakthroughs happen when people focus on their strengths. Not on fixing weaknesses, but on amplifying what they are already strong at. This assessment is the result of 33 years of research by the Red Bull team, together with professors from universities in New York and London. The R&D budget behind it was approximately USD 20 million. The test crystallizes your strengths. You receive a 20-page PDF with a clearly defined strategy, guidelines, and an action plan, all built around your core strengths. In my view, this can be extremely valuable. And of course, it is critical to lay the foundation properly, to articulate who you are, what you do, why you do it, and where you want to go. All your digital touchpoints should reflect this, including how you present yourself in messaging apps. Quite often, people open a conversation with you on Telegram, Viber, or WhatsApp and see a profile picture of a cat or a daisy. This also affects your personal and professional brand and how you are perceived. That is why alignment across all touchpoints is essential. Everywhere your target audience may potentially interact with you, when this alignment exists, the entire mechanism and system begin to work far more effectively.
Your story looks exactly like that to me. It is almost a textbook case. Someone who decided to change direction, identified their professional strength, and went all in. And we can see the result. A Guinness World Record for recommendations, a large number of corporate clients, and many people want to speak with Ihor about this topic, not only in the context of today's podcast, but far beyond it. This is exactly that moment. When you start to resonate with your purpose and radiate your core strength, the right people begin to gravitate toward you. And that superstar I mentioned earlier, you become one not because you decided to be, but because you are doing what you do best.
If we talk about communication channels that actually work today, they are primarily online, social media, most likely. There are, of course, offline channels as well. But realistically, there is far more happening online than offline. So the question is, which communication channels are truly right for today's world?
Honestly, this is a very broad question because in my view, even our core message is itself a communication channel. How we behave, how we show up, how we respond, people read this very quickly and immediately decide whether they want to engage with us or not. So when asking which channels are most effective, I would first return to the starting point. How am I showing up fundamentally? Do I resonate with others? Have I listened to myself and gathered feedback? Do people actually want to work with me or not? I would start there and only then move into the channels where my target audience actually is. That could be social media, in-person participation at conferences, articles, and so on. And there is also the question of how we use these channels. I recently came across a marketing and communications term, the quiet expert. It was a new concept for me. A good example is Anton Ptushkin. We all know who he is, but most of us don't actively follow him on Instagram. I personally don't, yet we know that when he releases something like his Antarctica project, it generates millions of views in a single weekend. He was working quietly in the background, and then suddenly everyone says, "Wow, This is also a form of communication, and in its own way, a channel. So what was his channel? Television, cinema, those are communication channels as well. Therefore, the first question is where your target audience is and how, with what intensity and in what format you are willing to be present there. As Ihor mentioned earlier, there are certain must-have channels. Social media in particular impose specific algorithms and rules which we have to work within in order to remain visible and not fall out of the information space. At the same time, there are other channels, and for example, participation in conferences. These may happen only once a year, but it is important to be present at key industry events. You attend, spend a day there, do your work, the channel delivers its impact, and then you scale that presence by repurposing the content across your own channels to create a post-event effect. In my view, there is no single correct answer or rigid scenario where you use only one channel and completely ignore others. Because beyond the audience itself, there is also a personal, organic desire to be visible and to shine within a particular channel. Some people are very effective at communicating complex topics on Instagram. Others manage to communicate very simple ideas effectively on LinkedIn, even though LinkedIn is often perceived as strictly corporate.
To what extent are Facebook and LinkedIn really replacing offline channels today?
It is difficult to answer this with precise numbers, but I do know the following. Outside our local context, Facebook is generally not considered a professional communication platform at all. It is perceived much like Odnoklasniki once was here. If you want to be taken seriously as a professional and communicate on equal footing, you are expected to share your LinkedIn profile before or after a meeting. It is part of professional etiquette. Moreover, even institutions that finance businesses take LinkedIn presence into account when deciding whether to approve financing or credit. I have a real example, Ihor Stepanov. In Texas, when he was securing financing and leverage to develop his project, one of the places the bank reviewed, after 3 years of operating in the US, was his LinkedIn profile and business pages. So, if I were to answer the question about channels, I would divide them into two broad categories: online and offline. Online includes everything that leaves a digital footprint within today's digital infrastructure, while offline includes these are the places where your target audience physically gathers, industry-specific associations and professional conferences, events that your target audience attends and helps shape. For me, metaphorically, building a personal brand and selling your expertise is very similar to hunting. You know exactly who you are hunting. You have the right weapon, loaded with ammunition of the correct caliber. You know where your target is concentrated, you aim there, and your chances of hitting the mark increase significantly. That is why online and offline channels must be combined, and when it comes to offline, I would even say it has become a new kind of luxury today. It is important to be physically present in the places where your target audience is, where peers, experts, and potential clients are. This allows for open dialogue, an opportunity to demonstrate your expertise, to show your mindset through conversation, and to spark interest or awareness that you have competencies your clients may need. At some point, I asked myself whether there was a simple formula, something you could almost sketch on a napkin, that explains how any sale works in the digital world. I couldn't find one, so I had to come up with it myself. It sounds like K plus V plus D equals money, monetization, where K stands for content. If we live in a digital world, content is a given. A blog, articles, profiles, public speaking, all of this is content. When this content enters the digital space, it generates interaction from the audience, from those with whom it resonates. Only after interaction does trust either emerge or fail to emerge, and when trust exists, price becomes a secondary issue. Through this formula, you can sell and buy virtually any product or service in today's digital world.
It is a very simple formula and a powerful one. I am confident, Ihor, that you have reviewed a large number of LinkedIn profiles, both company profiles and personal profiles of individuals. So here is a question. Can a LinkedIn profile or specific elements of it actually work against a candidate rather than in their favor during an evaluation process?
Absolutely, it can. For me, this comes down to congruence, or lack of congruence, between what you do, what you claim to do, and how you appear to others on the other side of the screen. So, if I were to give very practical advice to those who are considering board or supervisory roles, it would be to ensure that the key profile sections that influence decision-making look professional and coherent. First, your photo, your profile picture, as simple as it may sound, then your background image and your headline. To me, the headline is essentially a written elevator pitch. Very simple, very precise, and very concise. It should clearly and efficiently describe who you are, what you do, and the value you bring. Your experience must be properly articulated and accurately reflected. Your cases and achievements should be showcased. LinkedIn has a dedicated section called Projects. Unfortunately, many experts and professionals overlook it. Yet it allows you to package your experience in a much broader, clearer, and more substantial way. Another critically important section, and then I am certain decision makers pay close attention to it, is recommendations, because people ultimately buy people. Do you have public statements from respected professionals, people with strong reputations, who can openly recommend you and validate your professional standing, expertise, and results? These are the sections I personally focus on most, especially when looking through the lens of owners considering forming a board or selecting board members.
Social networks, LinkedIn in particular, are essentially a storefront, a reflection of who we are. There is no need to embellish or invent anything. Most often, the person reviewing your profile already knows something about you. They are not looking for new information. They are looking for confirmation of what they already believe. Possibly, most likely, yes, that can happen. And if some kind of dissonance starts there already, then there is no point in even talking about the third element of your formula. Trust will immediately begin to erode. And then, the person, you know how it works, we see what we want to see, will find something else to justify refusing cooperation.
And this is quite a serious question. Can a person realistically assess themselves, or is it better to turn to professionals who can guide them through this evaluation?
This is a classic old question. You cannot be your own lawyer and you cannot be your own doctor. A system cannot see itself from the inside. An external perspective is always necessary, so the answer is definitely yes. The real question then becomes, what is my actual need? Who do I need in this situation? Do I need a lawyer or do I need a doctor? From there you can choose, do I need a strategy? Do I need to work through my positioning? Or do I already understand everything and simply need execution and launch? Have I chosen LinkedIn or have I chosen Facebook? And if it is LinkedIn, then I go to Ihor. If it is Facebook, then I go to someone else. So the choice depends on what goal you have and what state you are in today. But unquestionably, doing this with someone's help is much easier. At the very least, to test your hypotheses. There is no need to open all wounds at once.
Is there perhaps a moment when you would advise an expert, as a next step in building their personal brand, to engage new channels, including digital ones such as YouTube, or perhaps personal columns on Forbes or NV, in order to strengthen their brand?
We return to the question of the target audience. If it is there, then it is worth doing. Also the question of resources. If there is an opportunity, it may be worth pursuing. However, it is important to understand that every move in a certain direction involves costs and expenditures. Take YouTube, for example. On the one hand, it is more expensive than LinkedIn. On the other hand, scaling on LinkedIn can also be costly. This includes paid subscriptions and content production, which can also require significant resources. At the moment, as far as I know, LinkedIn is strongly promoting video content and actively supporting it. As a result, there is already a clear demand for video content, which means it has to be produced. And the question, what kind of content should it be? High quality or more basic? In essence, LinkedIn has already decided for us that the target audience wants video. That decision has been made. Our task now is to create it, and this in turn drives results. There is a constant need to explore new options. Threads, for example, is a relatively new communication channel. It is changing very rapidly as it evolves. At first, hardly anyone used it. Then there was a peak of authenticity and openness where people were genuinely sharing and opening up. Now, when I open it, I mostly see brands communicating with each other, Nova Poshta, Rosetka, and others. It has even become less interesting to read. Or people complain to each other, and you start realizing that, in practice, I now mostly access it from my phone data and log in from a computer maybe once a day. Mainly just to understand in general what is happening. That is why another important point is experimentation. Trying things out, observing what works and what does not.
Dmytro, Ihor, what would you advise current or future board members when it comes to building their personal brand?
If we talk about decision makers, such as supervisory board chairs or companies that are engaging and searching for board members, the key advice would be to be clear and easy to understand. Because in essence, you are operating in a visible space. You are out there and people are watching you, and they do so based on the needs of those who are looking for you. It is about proper positioning and being present in the field where you are most likely to be found, rather than somewhere else where essentially no one knows about you.
I will once again answer as simply as possible using my own formula. It is about communicating correctly, about messages that are not built on assumptions or a random starting point, but on deep preparatory work to identify who you are, what you do, why you do it, how your competence is validated, and the public statements and proof points provided by others. It is communication with a target audience. Not with everyone, but with those who may realistically have a professional future with you. It is continuous interaction. It is a mix of online and offline presence in the right places, with the right people, and within the right companies. And ultimately, it is about building trust. Because without trust, no purchase and no sale happens in the modern world. So, to me, this is the most simplified version of the formula, a guideline for anyone who wants to build their brand, their visibility, and do so in a professional and conscious way.
To further expand on the question, where to start and how to build a strong personal brand, the answer is simple. Start by asking yourself questions. Start exploring, either on your own or with someone's help. Who am I? Where am I going? Who is my target audience? When working with clients, I followed a certain algorithm and realized that it would be useful to create something they could do independently, without my direct involvement. That is how the workbook emerged. Structured in a clear, sequential way, starting with the question, what do we have today? What does your personal brand look like right now? The first section, the second section, your positioning, your mission, your purpose, your big idea, and so on. The third section focuses on goals, where we are going and what we want to achieve. The following sections then cover the target audience and communication channels. Essentially, everything we discussed today is included there, and, in my view, it is a practical tool for an independent start. You asked earlier whether it is worth involving someone else. Perhaps it is not, if you are able to work through this independently. That is precisely why this tool was created, essentially as a self-guided instrument to work on your personal brand to start with and to assess the current state of affairs. If there is a need to make adjustments rather than start from scratch, it can be helpful in that case as well.
And can it be purchased?
Yes, of course, it can be purchased, and today we even decided that we can give it away as part of a draw, but the details are a matter of conditions. On LinkedIn, and Ihor will clarify.
Yes, keep an eye on LinkedIn. There will be a post announcing the release of this episode with a simple condition explaining how you can receive Dmytro Melnykovych's personal workbook, which will definitely help you lay the right foundation for your professional and personal brand.
And then build the walls together with Ihor?
With Dmytro or Sergiy as well.
Yes.
Dmytro, Ihor, thank you very much for a very interesting conversation and for the extremely valuable insights.
Likewise.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for your invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. See you on the channel.